from Mr. Arif Yusuf Karim. Mrs. Teresa D'Souza, in our time, was an amazing and sincere teacher and laid a solid foundation for many, including myself. Mr. Abdul Rasul Sheikh was another. He was involved in Alibhai Panju School, participating in our first ever inter-schools primary cricket tournament, which we won and continued winning for several years. From Mr. Hasnain Karim, referring to the Allama Iqbal's poetry, Lab Pe Aati Hai Dua, posted by Mrs. Hamida Asnari. If I'm not mistaken, this was S.A.Mahdi's choice stroke pick for students to recite and choir led by Sir Loving, and we students recited this beautiful poetry in the school assembly sessions as well as at official functions of the school. There is so much meaning in this poetry. From Mr. Shabir Jiwa, the only teachers of the kindergarten I do remember were Mrs. Amina Moledina, and I guess the other woman was Mrs. Fernandez. She was a heavy, fair woman. Anyone remembers who used to run the canteen? I used to volunteer to help to get a freebie chana batata.
From Mr. Ghulam Abbas Sharif Jiwa. Sadly, we left all our good memories. Nothing can replace. Our children will never understand. We had little money, which was never an issue. My best time was fishing and diving from Fanevale. That was amazing. From Mr. Amin Ladak and Mr. Hasnain Ghulam Sen. When I started school, we had already upgraded to fountain pens. The desk had a hole for the ink pot. Fountain pens were from Standard 4 and the famous Hero pen.
From Mr. Ramzan Parvana, Mullah Hassan Ali Karmali used to sell us the holders, nibs, blotting papers, and ink tablets. All we had to do was dissolve them in water and fill the pot. The ink pots were magical in that they were spill-proof even if you turned them upside down. Being ceramic, they were not shatterproof. No biros were ever permitted. I'm talking of the time when the school was operating out of the Bustani. The desks there were huge and not like a baby seen here. Someone mentioned the then popular Hero pen. Indeed, it was cheap and best. However, do Google and look for Tiku pen. It was a pen of very unique writing mechanism and was kind of a must-have for many. It had a fine tubular nib where the volume of ink was regulated by a small metal barrel that allowed measured ink to flow through the tubular rib. Today, a good but used old Tiku pen can fetch close to $150 each. A must-read article and comments on the history of writing instruments that use ink. The first school magazine was published in the year 1957. These are treasures. Jamaat and school are perpetual, inshallah, but us here are mere mortals, and such treasures can disappear after our departure, and those who we leave behind may not value such things like we do. From Dr. Murtaza Megji, what an incredible pleasure to see these rare 3 photos of the presumably first issue of the Alibhai Panju Primary School magazine. We should make every effort to refurbish the original full magazine, notwithstanding the cost. Such a magazine depicts the very early soul of our precious school. A few years ago, you may recall that I posted a full copy of the 1958, which was the second printing of this magazine. It was languishing peacefully in the archives of one of our school members, but relatively well preserved, thankfully, because of the sunny weather in Florida. With the exceptional help of this brother, who elected to remain anonymous, although I would have been happy to shower the most exquisite accolades on him on behalf of our whole group for preserving a pristine copy of the 1959 school magazine, despite the vagaries of a 60-plus a year journey across several continents. I have a particular affinity for this 1958 magazine, since I had the distinct honor of being its first student editor. I remember sitting in Mr. Patel's Standard 7 class, the first class on the left after the monkey lithographs, when S.A.Mahdi came to the class unannounced and said he had a gift for me, following which he handed me the first crisp copy of the 1958 Alibhai Panju School magazine. Needless to say, I was absolutely floored at such a magnanimous gesture by the esteemed school principal, no less. All because I had the humble task of writing and editing this precious magazine along with others, one of which I'm pretty certain was a female student, also in Standard 7, but obviously not in my boys' Standard 7 class due to the gender segregation at that time. I'm sorry that after exactly 65 years, I can't possibly recall that young lady's name, but I would very much appreciate being reminded by a group member who this young lady was. Actually, having written the above, I spent almost an hour scrolling through the previous pages of this wonderful group, and voila, I was able to find it. Her name is Miss Shirin Rashid, who was my co-student editor for the 1958 school magazine. The progress I posted in April 2021, I believe. For all of us, it would indeed be very interesting to scroll through the 1958 magazine. So many of our names are featured in it. It is a magazine of such incredible historical significance that I would like, with your support and permission, to reprint it in full glory so that it can become one of our most beloved coffee table magazine. As for the 1957 issue of the Alibhai Panju magazine, which initiated this garrulous tirade of mine in the first place, I would request others better acquainted with its whereabouts to kindly start the same process of rejuvenating this priceless piece of wonderful archives. Indeed, one of the distinct pleasures of life for those of us, most of us presumably, old codgers in our 7th decade of life, is the gift and pleasure of reminiscing the good old days we were so fortunate to experience in Mombasa as part of a minuscule Khoja Shia Isnasi Jamaat community of less than 2,000 souls, yet blessed with such foresight and wisdom that we excelled and continue to excel with near 1,000 members only now in Mombasa. But most importantly, we have given rise to a broad diaspora of kind souls who have carried the flag literally worldwide.
From Mrs. Tahira Datu. Dr. Amilaka, a great incentive. With your permission, I'm going to post your idea in the ladies' alumni. Hope to get some feedback from them. Salams. I should mention the top 3 girls in the 1964 batch. Our teacher was Mrs. Amina Ali Muhammad, residing in Sydney, Australia. Excellent teacher. I met her after 50 years in Sydney a couple of years back. Top 3 girls were number 1 Naeem Ibrahim, number 2 Rehana Devji, and 3 Tahira Walji Datu. Naeem is in Switzerland, Rehana in States, and I am in Toronto. It's such a pity that our union was postponed. We were all looking forward. From Dr. Murtaza Megji. Wonderful to see that our APPS dialogue has now been rejuvenated. I am Naeem Ibrahim's mama. She studied medicine at Nairobi University. She worked as a senior district medical officer in the Machakos area for many years. Did all sorts of general and obstetric surgeries. When her 3 girls became old enough, her husband and the whole family emigrated to Switzerland, where the children went to school, universities, and are now doctors too. Naeem works for the International Red Cross in Switzerland. Naeem's younger sister Naseem, also an APPS alumnus, is a family doctor in Victoria, Canada.
From Mr. Ramzan Parwana, that our late beloved Principal Sayyid Ali-Mahdi Sahib was an angel in human garbs is how I can describe him and the stellar role that he assumed in bringing about a major inqilab not only in our esteemed APPS but also in the community as a whole. He revolutionized the mindset of our elders and our leaders. The seeds that were initially sown in the extremely rudimentary setup of a community school in the masjid and bustani premises have now blossomed into an educational icon with international recognition. The Mali, in brackets, gardener of this ever-blooming gardener, was none other than Marhum Sayyid Ali-Mahdi, for when he descended upon us in mid-50s, he found a parched desert punctuated with a few isolated shrubs struggling to grow, so he got down to business right away and converted the desert into a huge oasis. MashaAllah, his rewards are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Fatiha. Ramzan Parwana, first graduate, December 1956.